In this section, we are going to explore the state of shock, which is the first phase you will enter once your heart suffers emotional trauma, and with it, the diseases that we saw in the previous module develop. The most obvious symptom that people who go into a state of shock develop is confusion. That feeling in which, because of the trauma to which they have been exposed, they do not know where to go or what to do. If you have ever had your partner break up with you suddenly, or you found out that he or she was cheating on you, you know what I am talking about. You enter a state where you want to go somewhere else, but you don't know where. And in fact, you don't know what to do at that moment to avoid what is happening in your life at that moment. On that basis, the second sensation that you will experience in the state of shock arises, which is paralysis. Which is paradoxical because, on the one hand, you are going to want to move and go anywhere, so as not to be in the space you are in at that moment, but you are also not going to know how to do it, because the state of shock will subject you to an experience in which you will lose the ability to make your own decisions. Now, what causes all this? Essentially, the surprise you experience at the fact that your entire life changes suddenly. It was something you didn't expect to happen, but it happens anyway. You had become accustomed to a specific order in your life, and on that basis, you projected your future. One in which there was apparently order and stability. But what happens? Suddenly, all that is lost due to the breakup of a relationship or disappointment in love, which in turn causes your life to change completely without you being prepared for it. What problems arise with a state of shock? The first and most obvious is that you lose control of your emotions and thoughts, which are affected by the effect that occurs when your entire life changes in an instant. Now, I should point out that this state of shock, like the other states we are going to explore here, usually lasts for 2 weeks each. 2 weeks for the shock state, and then 2 more weeks for the next state. But all this, I tell you, is only valid for what you perceive. You perceive this state of shock for 2 weeks until the next state of your psyche develops. But what happens? You remain in a state of shock for much longer than your perceptions allow you to realize. Years might pass in which you remain in a state of shock with the actions to which that state subjects you. That is why it is so important that you learn to recognize and treat its effects immediately. Now, what causes shock in you? Mainly, that you fall into a phase in which you try to overcome your state of shock by reestablishing as soon as possible that order that you lost. And on that basis, you enter another subphase in which you try to understand what happened to you without finding answers for it. The problem with all this is that the state of shock leads you to constantly go back to the obsessive search for that order that was lost, and therefore you lose the ability to live in your present and accept what has happened to you. An example that can I give you in this regard is that of people who become obsessed with an ex-partner and who want to get back with that person as a way to get out of that state of shock as quickly as possible. Throughout these years, I have had many cases of people who fell into depression because they were trying to get back with a person who had been toxic to them in the past. Other people somatize that state of shock that I am talking about here by having dreams about their ex partner, precisely because at an unconscious level they have developed some desire to reestablish that order that they lost by returning to that past that will never happen again. Given this framework, what happens if you do not treat the effects of shock. On the one hand, you are going to be trapped in an ideal past, which never really existed, which in turn will cause you to become a prisoner of a relationship that did not work and that was bad for you. And based on all this, the biggest problem that you are going to face will arise due to the state of shock, which is the fact that most of your decisions in the present will be made not thinking about what you are experiencing in the future, that specific moment in your life, but in trying by all means to re-establish that order that you lost at some point in your life and that subjected you to that state of shock that on an unconscious level you continue to experience, even many years after you have suffered the trauma. That is why many people try to live in their present relationships the relationship they lost in the past, with all its fears and problems. What is the solution to not suffer the effects of a state of shock so severely, and above all, to resolve it as quickly as possible so that it does not affect your life? The main thing is that you manage to return to your present as soon as possible. To do this, what we do is dilute the noodle that has formed in your psyche, which leads you to believe that in your past you had a happy time to which you want to return because you fear living in your present. The idea of all this is that you can once again see and appreciate the difficulties and challenges that you have in your present as the great bridge so that you can build your future, the one where your true happiness is found. So with this, you already know that the first phase that will arise in you is the state of shock. The next is the self-pity, which we are going to work on in the respective section. I see you there.